in the morning. Let's take a little bit of a different twist on that conversation that we just had when we were discussing most important things, most important items on the schedule, swing games, fork in the road games. I'm going to circle back to the Auburn schedule, then we'll go back to the Alabama schedule, Greg. Sticking with that conversation, we just finished up the Alabama conversation, so let's stay there. Let's go to that Kentucky game. If we all decide, John, did you have a different opinion on the Kentucky game being the swing game, fork in the road game for Alabama based on our conversation and where it ended?
The way you laid it out, no. I mean, Georgia comes to mind, Florida State, but the way, especially where Kentucky is, no, that's the one.
All right, Greg, so if that's the case, listen, it's all of them. It's collective. We get it, but we can have these conversations in different ways on our show because we're not coaching the team.
Correct.
Give me a player or players that are most important in that particular game for you there. Now, you look at that Kentucky roster. Kenny Minchey probably going to be the quarterback. You have a slew of new offensive linemen that are going to have to play. You have transfer receivers in Nick Anderson and company they're going to have to play. C.J. Baxter, Javonte Barnes at running back. Texas and Oklahoma transfers.
Very good. Very good transfers, by the way.
Very good. Not as many on defense that I feel like will be first in line guys. Some maybe, but a new scheme on both sides of the ball. But based on how you feel like it's going to operate, what they're going to be, what they're going to do, who becomes maybe most important on each side of the football for Alabama in that particular matchup on that day, I think it's easy to say quarterback. So let's just kind of try not to go that direction.
Yeah, we can remove that. I think quarterback's obvious. I'm going to pull up the depth chart quickly because I thought you were going in the Kentucky direction there. I was like, well, goodness gracious, there's a bunch.
No, there is. And I'll say I'll start it off here because I think I have, at least on defense, where I would go first. I think your easy answer would be Bray Hubbard because we talked about him being a playmaker earlier, but I think he makes his plays. I think it is probably a QB Reese or if it's Caleb Woodson, whoever is next, because you remember last year we had those two proven off-the-ball linebackers.
Right.
And when they did not play well, the defense did not play well. When they were injured and dinged up, you could tell they weren't on the field. And with a lot of the quick game, a lot of screens, things of that nature, spreading the field, using the width of the field, I think that position becomes critical for Alabama in this game. Also because we don't just know it. They're not household names.
Yes.
And we're used to household names at that position for that team.
Correct.
So that's kind of where I would go first for Alabama as most important in that matchup.
Understand that. I still think with Minchey's a veteran, but hasn't started a ton. And given their resources that they attributed to the offensive line and the running back position, I think Kentucky's going to be a pound the football team. I know Will Stein is going to have a little bit more methodical passing attack, going to be a little bit more thoughtful when it comes to doing things through the air, more so than what Bush Hamden did, who was really on more traditional drop back, play action, standard two back, two tight end looks. Like you're going to run the ball a lot out of 11. But if you look at Oregon the last couple of years, what did Oregon do remarkably well?
They have run the football.
They run the dang ball. And if you talk to Will Stein, I've known Will for a while now, Will Stein has never had more regret than when he did having played against Indiana in the regular season last year and run the ball 20 times at 5.5 yards a pop. They got sacked a bunch, but when they handed it off, they got their yards. Now, they weren't allowed to do that in the second matchup because they were behind. So it became a throw-a-thon.
Yes.
So it's hard to really use that one. So for me, it's probably London Simmons on defense.
It's a good one.
Maybe Jeremiah Beeman coming back from injury. What's he looking like? You go and you put some money into Terrence Green, big body interior defensive lineman who can hopefully kind of hold up there on the inside. I think stopping the run with the front four is huge because you're going to get some of those quick pop passes, screens, short, quick completions, some RPO stuff. You're going to get some vertical shots. But I think, look, Kenny Minchey's still going to be young in his starting career. You're going to get a team that's committed to running the football. And they probably want to take some of the air out of the ball, too, because they know they're going to have some struggles on defense. They're going to have some challenges on defense because they don't have as many resources on that side of the ball based on what it looks like they've done in the portal. So I think they're going to try to pound it.
The more you talk about it, the more it feels like a Devin Tompkins style game, who is a transfer defensive end from USC who plays down inside some, but he's not totally built for that. He is a good strike and shed defensive lineman, but he is not a dominant interior defensive lineman. And you go back to a lot of what you're talking about with Oregon. When I think about the successful runs, I don't think about a ton of just downhill right at you runs. They hit you with it occasionally, but not where they're going to live. So if you could have a bigger body that could maybe move outside a little bit and help shake things up in between the guard and tackle, off tackle, maybe just outside tackle that became difficult to deal with, he becomes pretty important. I'm not going to say the most important, but he and Yanze Pierre I think, become just as important there with both of our discussions because, yes, that run's going to be there, but I feel like the off tackle stuff is probably what needs to be taken away first. Yeah. Specifically with an offensive line that we just don't know what it's going to be or look like. Sure. Because there's so many new pieces. Yeah. I like some of the pieces they got. I haven't seen them together, so I have no idea what that's going to look like and how it's going to operate.
Well, when you know, let me know. I'm not sure Kane knows yet, so it'd be great because it will be, I think, a really tricky situation. I think you're going to be chasing some ghosts in this game. Yeah, like that's that. Then guess what? You chase
the ghost of Bear Bryant because he coached at Kentucky.
But then. I'm going to be honest with you. The A&M game's now tough. I didn't even think about Bear Bryant's impact here.
My.
A&M's got revenge on their mind because we stole Bear Bryant.
Yeah, they do.
He came home.
So same with Kentucky.
Dang it. We need to cancel this game.
Same.
In all seriousness, you're chasing ghosts, though. Like, what did you do last year against Florida State? You chased dang ghosts. Mm-hmm. Like, when you're playing against a team with a new identity, you don't really know what to prepare for. You're doing all this stuff. You're looking back at Will Stein's stuff from last year at Oregon. You're looking back at Kentucky from last year and how they were and their personnel that's carrying over. You're looking at transfers from a million different places. Just a hard prep.
They're going to be looking at Will Stein film from places that he was like an analyst.
They're going to be looking at UTSA.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be looking at all of it.
They're prepping that game now.
Like I remember talking to Kane before the season last year, and he's like, we're watching this. We've gone back to take a look at that. Like, we've looked at the Memphis stuff. We've looked at Auburn stuff. We've looked at UCF stuff. I mean, and I think too, Greg, the more you start looking and thinking, you overthink that a little bit. You start, like you said, chasing ghosts. You go back to, he was on staff at wherever back in 2005. We should probably take a look at that when they went against our corners coach. It's just like, are they really thinking about it that hard? Or are they just going out there trying to run their stuff? And it's tough. That's why early games are difficult because the unknown of what people are even going to try to implement and try to do. And if there's something that they found out in camp they're really good at that none of them have made a living on before, yes, they may try to make a living on it in that game.
Might.
And it becomes extremely difficult. So what about on offense for Alabama?
Pretty simple.
Is it one of the backs?
No.
Is it Racing Delgatti?
No, I don't think it's one of the backs.
Is it just getting Ryan Williams going?
I mean, that'd be great. I mean, you get. I think the receivers. It's like I think it'll be Lottie Brooks. He'll get a lot of looks. I think
Noah Rogers gets some.
Yeah, I think your receivers. It's a pick your poison. Like, all right, you want to double Lottie? Cool, no problem. Here comes Ryan. You want to double Ryan? Cool, and here comes Noah. Like, I think it's one of those where it's a little bit like last year. It's kind of week to week. Like some weeks you're going to get the X really involved. You know, last year, I mean, you could think about it. There are a handful of games, especially in the red zone, when Isaiah Horton got a lot of looks. There are a handful of games when Ryan Williams got a lot of looks. There are a handful of games when Lottie Brooks got a lot of looks. There are a handful of games when Jeremy Bernard got a lot of looks. I mean, I think it's going to be a little bit of a pick your poison. They're not really an offense outside of when Jerm was really going last year where they're like, all right, we have to get this guy 15 looks. Like, we got to get him 10 touches. Yeah. Like, it's not, I don't see it being that way this year unless there's some remarkable growth from Lottie Brooks and Ryan Williams becomes the guy he was 2 years ago, which is 100% possible, by the way. No one wants to acknowledge the possibility of that, but to me, this is going to be a bit in the weeds. I'm going to go tight end. We got some unknowns at tackle. We got some unknowns at offensive line. So if I'm putting this offensive plan together, I'm sitting there saying, all right, we don't know what our O-line is going to look like. Are we going to have to help our tackles? We don't really know what Kentucky's going to have either. Are we going to have to help our tackles? Are we going to have to help with Caleb Edwards off the left side, helping Javen James, or whoever ends up being, or Jackson Lloyd, whoever ends up being the left tackle? Like, are we going to have to help that side? Like, is there going to be need? And you're going to want to make sure you're super sound in protection in a game like this because you have a young quarterback on the road for the first time.
Yeah.
So you don't want to, you're probably not going to have a lot of 5-out protection. You know, you're going to have probably some guys helping the tackle, probably err on the side of help. And if they can hold up over the course of time, then you get away from that. But I think you probably start a little conservative. So I think Caleb Edwards, Marshall Pritchett, and Jay Lindsey, I mean, those are the guys that are going to need to take a big step this year. And I could say tight end is probably going to be a real important piece, as always.
No, and it's, I have brought up tight end for this team multiple times already this offseason. And one of the main reasons I've done it is we hear the comments of how great Ty Simpson was. And some people recognize Jeremy Bernard. Some people even realize that Parker Brailsford was really good. You almost hear no one. And I don't like playing this game. I don't like saying this. Very few people outside of us, I feel like, have had serious conversations about how good Josh Cuevas was when he was in games and healthy. And he made a difference for that team last year. Let's go back 2 years ago. You basically had two of them that were battering rams that could also help you in other ways.
Yep.
I don't know who those guys are going to be this year. And I do know that the last few years, I do know that a lot of years at Alabama, tight end has been magnificent. And some years, O.J. Howard, maybe not even deservingly so, got a ton of pub and a ton of run.
No.
Other years, Irv Smith deserved a lot more run than he got. He was fantastic. I think he was drafted accordingly, but you didn't hear a lot of people talking about him. But it's not a position that's gotten its due diligence a lot of the time, specifically the last couple of years. And now we don't even know who it may end up being. I don't know what Caleb Edwards is going to give you. I don't know what Marshall Pritchett's going to give you or Jay Lindsey. So I am with you, and I have been there this entire offseason of I need to know what that position is going to look like. And I just don't know right now. So that's another one, too. That, like you said, that can help you in protection. That can help you in the run game. It's going to be a new quarterback. That's a position that you would like to have to be able to sort of dictate what the defense is giving you or can do against you. And we don't know that about Alabama right now. I'm with you. It's one of my biggest question marks on this team and want to know how that's going to look and want to know what that's going to be because Cuevas was great when he was going for Alabama last year.
I think tight end the offense is so much better when the tight end is playing at a high level. So I think that anytime we're assessing, look, big picture, it's easy to say wide out. It's easy to say quarterback. It's easy to say center, whoever that might be. I think if we're going to go next level and you really want to get into it, like having a quality tight end with a young quarterback that you can kind of get you out of jail free, that is of high importance. And it's a tremendous luxury and security blanket to have a tight end that can be impactful in protection and helping with your outlets in the passing game.
No doubt. All right, let's flip this around, and we'll talk a little bit of Auburn roster. That game early in the schedule that we looked at and wondered which one is most important, that swing game. Who might be the most important, most critical players for that Auburn roster in that game if it ends up being Florida, if it ends up being Tennessee, if it ends up being Arkansas, like Greg said. We'll have that discussion right after this on Jocks. All right, welcome back in. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, talking SEC swing games, 800-239-9569. We'll return back to that conversation later in the show. We'll get to the Auburn schedule. Key players in whichever swing game it is that we finally decide is going to sort of move the season for Auburn. Decide if they're going to be maybe barely bowl eligible, scratching, clawing to get that 6th win, or maybe well past that. Who will be the players or needed most in those games that we're going to discuss? But we're going to go to John Bryce now on the Higginbotham hotline. First off, to discuss just a tragic loss in the world of college football. John, you had a chance to spend a really nice amount of time with Lou Holtz not long ago and got to see just some things behind the scenes about him, how he operates, his family. How will you remember the legendary former head coach at multiple stops across college football?
You know, I'd covered a couple of his games when he was at South Carolina against Tennessee, obviously some 20 years ago. And then once I moved to South Bend, I got to know him a little bit. Close friend of mine, Paul Berrettini, had been mentored a bit by Lou Holtz, so I got to spend some time with him in that regard. Even before then, late in the 2024 season, I got to watch a game inside Notre Dame Stadium with Lou Holtz and chronicle that experience for Football Scoops. So I'll remember his wit and wisdom. He was as keen and dialed in to that Notre Dame Louisville game that day as anybody you can imagine, and he was still coaching throughout the game from the luxury suite that he was watching the game in, and he still had keen insight going into halftime and telling me, like, Notre Dame's going to win the first 5 minutes of the second half and Notre Dame will win this game. And it was just really fascinating to see him, even at that advanced age, still be that locked in and still be able to make those types of observations that were still very pertinent to the game at hand.
It's amazing how sharp he always was. I mean, just so sharp, so witty, so quick. So do you have a story in the time that you guys spent together to kind of illustrate that wit, that sharpness, that just no one was harder on himself than himself. It was just, he's an amazing guy. So do you have a story that would reflect that?
You know, there were a ton of former players with us in the box that day, including Tony Rice, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but he had a quip to Tony Rice about throwing the football that just cracked me up that day. And again, obviously, it had been almost 30 years since Tony Rice, or more than 30 years since Tony Rice had played quarterback for him, but he just had a real funny wit about it. And then there was another event where he was speaking the day before Georgia played at Notre Dame in 2018, I think that was, and Notre Dame really outplayed Georgia that day, and Georgia found a way to win it late. And but the day before the game, everybody's talking about the SEC and what do we need to do to this and what do we need to do to that, and none of that's going to matter because we're the Notre Dame Fighting Irish and we're going to win this game tomorrow. And that was just sort of him. And then his back and forth, even more recently, I guess 3 years ago, with Ryan Day, certainly was very memorable, and he was every bit as quick-witted then against Ryan Day as at any point in his career.
We're talking with John Bryce. You can follow him on Twitter at John D. Bryce. Congrats on the new job with USA Today, by the way. Glad to have him on the Higginbotham hotline. I want to go back to the time that you referenced when you were covering Tennessee and he took over at South Carolina. Try to put into perspective for those who may not have a true understanding how bad things were in Columbia when he took over, and then because they didn't compete for national titles, but what he actually did based on where they were was beyond remarkable and probably deserves a lot more recognition than it still gets.
Well, that's a great point, Cole, because they were dreadful. They were coming off a winless season. They hadn't won anything of note. They had one conference title in the program's entire history, I think, at that point in time. I don't know that they'd ever had a game where game day originated live from there, and game day originated live from there, I think, a few times under Lou Holtz. I mean, to put it in the most blunt terms possible, until the last 2 years of Diego Pavia in the Music City, South Carolina was Vanderbilt, and he turned that around, and South Carolina has never been Vanderbilt since then. So I think that's the best way of putting it, is that South Carolina had sunk to a level where it was one of the two worst jobs and one of the two worst programs in the SEC at that time, and then he elevated it.
It's kind of crazy. I mean, I know it was not, they didn't result in any national championships, but how do South Carolina fans kind of reflect on that season of life with Lou Holtz as their head coach?
I think South Carolina fans point to that time as turning around what South Carolina could be, and that made it an attractive enough job to get other high-profile coaches in there. Certainly Spurrier came not long after that, and then he took them to an even greater level and had his great wins against Alabama and Clemson while he was at South Carolina. But I really think that the Gamecocks fans are so loyal and have been so great through the years and had not had a lot to cheer for. And they'd had some flash-in-the-pan moments with the late, great Steve Tannehill and some players like that. But I think South Carolina fans probably view him as the guy that got South Carolina stabilized and made South Carolina attractive to more than just its own fans. In other words, they could get other people interested in South Carolina football to help it take that next step.
John Bryce joining us on the Higginbotham Hotline of USA Today Sports has covered Notre Dame, also covered Tennessee when Lou Holtz was playing against them at South Carolina. You mentioned talking to former players at different points in time. Did any ever reference that sort of self-deprecating style? I was trying to lay it out as one of the first things I remember about him when he was still a head coach was just how awful he always stated his teams were. They couldn't run the ball. They weren't going to be able to stop anybody on defense. The other team was so much better than capable than they were at quarterback, and they couldn't catch the ball. They couldn't get open. Have you ever heard that reference to – I'd love to know – I think we're going to have Aaron Taylor on the show tomorrow, but I'd love to know how he addressed that with his team after he said those things in the media. That's all. I've always been curious of that. Have you spoke to any former players about that specific topic and that specific strategy that he implemented?
The players said that Lou Holtz always made it clear to them that he believed in them, that he had full belief in them, that they could go out and beat anybody. I think he made it clear to them not to listen to that. That was part of him not wanting his players to believe the media one way or the other. Don't listen to how great the media tells you are. I do know this. Lou Holtz, his witticisms and his candor, it was not accidental, and I'm sure some of your SEC Network, ESPN colleagues, for both you guys, can relate to it as well. But my understanding is a lot of his witty sayings, he had practiced beforehand. He anticipated questions that he would get or opportunities that he would get to needle an opponent or have a great one-liner, and they were never by accident. They were always he worked on those about like he worked on a game plan.
I'm a little disappointed to hear that, but I also appreciate it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want that. I thought it was just verbatim off the cuff, but still, the fact that he had the foresight to know what was coming and what would be asked. Is there one saying in particular or one experience at the press conference that kind of stands out to you that you recall fondly or one that he felt strongly about? Is there one that stands out?
I don't know if there's necessarily one that stands out as much as just, I mean, look, he always had his, like, if you put the ball in the air, only three things can happen and two of them are bad. That was a big one. And that one, there's still some people that kind of believe in that. And, no one has ever drowned in sweat is another really good one. But I just think that I'll remember, again, not a single one as much as I will remember he had that with him all the way until the very end.
Yeah.
And people who got to visit with him in the last couple of months when he was really immobilized and in dwindling shape still talked about how same old coach. And I know some family members got to go visit him in the past few weeks, and he hadn't lost his wit then, and he was needling family members, and some family members felt like it was probably the last time they were going to see him, and he still had that wit about him. So just how sharp his faculties were till the very end. I mean, it's so many great lines that I think it's pretty hard pick out just one, but certainly for me, even getting to cover some of his games, and then, like I said, getting to really one of the greatest opportunities of my journalism career is spending a day watching a game in person with him. But I think I'll just remember all of that and remember the way that he treated people. And that's the other thing. You asked me about the players. Every player will tell you he empowered them beyond anything they could have believed in themselves. And I've gotten to become friends with Derek Mays and Rick Meyer and some other former Notre Dame greats through the years. And those guys all talk about how much he made them believe they could do more than they believed that they could do.
John, before I let you run, we went through some of the accolades in his career and discussed kind of where he falls rankings wise for a few. Where does Lou Holtz deserve to be mentioned in the lore of great college football coaches, and where do you think he falls sort of in the public eye?
I think he falls very, very high up there. I would say that of modern era college football, he's on the Mount Rushmore. I don't think there's really very much question about that. I think that what he did for so many different programs that had not won or that had sunk to the doldrums, I think that because of that, he is an iconic figure. And then so many more people got exposed to him and then learned about his career because of that for the decade plus that he spent at ESPN. And his bit with Mark May and Reese Davis as the judge is all-time television. I mean, that's up there with the Olbermann and Dan Patrick Sports Centers. That's as good as it got for our generation, in my opinion. So I think people will long revere him because of his impact on the game as a coach and because of what he did for the game beyond his coaching years. And then, look, those Notre Dame, he stockpiled talent at Notre Dame the way that Nick Saban stockpiled talent at Alabama and both those guys turned around sleeping giant programs that are as brand name in college football as it gets.
John, we appreciate the time. Great perspective, great info on the life of Lou Holtz, one that you have been close to many times. We appreciate you sharing it with us today.
Yeah, I always love visiting with you boys. Have a great day.
Absolutely. John Bryce of USA Today has covered Tennessee, has covered Notre Dame, sharing his thoughts on Lou Holtz in an article that he shared yesterday, again, from that day he spent watching a college football game with Lou Holtz. We'll share that from the Mac and Cube account. You can go check that out. All right, great stuff there from John on the Higginbotham hotline. When we circle back, it'll be more on that Auburn swing game, that Auburn fork in the road game, and what players will be most important in it. We'll do that next right here on Jocks. All right, welcome back in. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. It is 8:34, Thursday, March the 5th, right here on Jocks. Listen online, jocksfm.com. If you missed that interview with John Bryce talking life of Lou Holtz, you can go back and find it, jocksfm.com, or the app. The app is in the App Store. You can always download it there, find it for free. That'll direct you to the YouTube page. You can watch us live on YouTube or go back during the day and watch live on YouTube each and every day. Search WJOX 945 when looking for the YouTube page. Also, our friends at Train want you to know flu season's hanging around. Pollen season's here. You just heard it in studio right there. The allergies are starting to kick up. Make your home healthier with Train's Clean Effects Home Air Cleaner. Removes up to 99.9% of airborne particles that cause allergy and virus, 100 times more effective than standard air filters, 8 times more effective than HEPA room filters. Find a dealer near you at train.com. It's hard to stop a train. If you missed earlier portions of the show, we were discussing fork in the road games, swing games, season-deciding games for Auburn and Alabama. And this might be a fun practice to just continue daily. Take an SEC team, look at that schedule, most important game, then look at the rosters and what may be most important in that game. We most of us came down, most of our thought process came down to the Florida game, right?
Yes.
And then that goalpost moved a smidge. We can kind of make it move a little bit to a couple of others, be it LSU to avoid maybe what would be a long losing streak or the Lane Kiffin factor or not losing another game at home. You said Arkansas later to maybe start an into the season run to gather up a few wins. Tennessee going into the bye week before you play back-to-back road games at Georgia. But Florida feels like the one that makes the most sense. If we took that game and we said, and you can be a part of the show, 800-239-9569, text in 205-834-9450, tweet in at Mac and Cube. That is the most important. That's the one that will go furthest in deciding what type of season Auburn has. When you look at the Auburn roster now, Greg, who becomes most important on that Auburn roster, specifically in that matchup against Florida?
It's so easy to say the quarterback because of the style of offense that they're going to play, right? I mean, we know that the quarterback in this style of attack needs to be decisive and needs to play well. So in an effort to avoid the obvious, dare I say Bryson Washington?
Very important, I think.
Create some balance. I don't even know if he's going to be the number one guy. I'd assume he is, but him or Jeremiah Cobb, whoever is the lead back, I'm assuming Washington will be that guy. So he'd probably be the direction I'd go. The other problem with Auburn this year is there's so much new.
Yes.
I don't really know who is going to be the all points bulletin number one. Would it be a Chaz Nimrod potentially? Got some SEC experience, has played at a pretty high level, has some length, has some speed. Would he potentially be that guy? I don't know. Is he the go-to guy in the offense? No clue. There's no one that can tell me that for sure.
I'm going to give you probably the most milquetoast answer I can here.
Perfect.
Probably the most just common answer that most people would look at and say, well, okay, nice stretch there.
Yes.
It's Xavier Atkins.
On defense.
On defense.
Okay, I was talking offense, but yeah, I'm with you.
I'm going defense, but I'm also going for the game.
Okay.
Because the first thing we think Florida is going to do on offense is what?
I think Florida will probably try to run the football.
Yeah, with Jaden Ball, they're going to try to hammer it. And he can take that away to an extent. He can be physical enough to play against that. If it's perimeter run game, he can help you with that. Also, his instincts and experience with an option that's probably going to give you, I said an option, an offense that's going to give you options on almost every play. That's just how they operate. Quarterback can keep, quarterback can run, he can pull, he can throw, he can pop it different directions. It's going to have all of it. His ability to react to some of that, very important.
Yeah.
And then who's the guy that we brought up that nobody's talking about last week for the Florida offense?
Eric Singleton.
Who's going to be all over the place.
Correct.
They'll line him up out wide, in the slot, in the backfield. They'll move him. They'll hand it to him. They'll throw it to him quick. They'll throw it to him deep. I think he has to help he's not going to cover him. They're not going to put him on him man to man, but he has to be a part of taking him away.
Right.
And not just him. Like we said, Jaden Ball. And maybe if Philo runs the ball, him. But the multitude of weapons that can be used in different ways, There's one guy that I see on that defense that can have a hand in almost all of that. Oh, also, by the way, pressuring a young quarterback and making him uncomfortable.
You don't say.
Yeah. I mean, Xavier Atkins, I think, was tied for third in the SEC in sacks last year.
I'd say that's pretty good.
So Auburn's defense will need him in all the ways based on what the Florida offense is going to have.
Every one of them.
And I think he becomes probably the most important player on the field in that game for me.
I can see why you would go in that direction. I'm not sure there's really anyone else I can present at this point to tell you for sure it's going to be a different guy that's of significant importance. He's your best player. Your best players in a game like that need to play well, and that's more than reasonable. The one thing I would say is with Florida's style of attack, I could see a defensive tackle being of significant importance. I think they're going to run the football. They're committed to running the football. You got 230-pound back. The offensive line does maybe have a couple question marks on it. So if you have a guy up front along the D line that can maybe gap penetrate, get through, create some problems, that would be significant. That'd be helpful. Who is that guy?
Oof.
I'm not sure I got the answer for you right now.
Well, you'd love to have 97 back this year.
It'd be real helpful, but he ain't back. So is it a Malik Autry? Is it a...
Cody
one of the
Sigler, Walter
transfers?
Mathis are transferring. Dallas Walker had some good reps last year at times. Jared Smith did some good things at times last year. He looks like he could be a guy that helps you sort of inside and outside some. I'm with you, though. That cannot be a liability because then, here, I'll take your question or your answer and roll it into my answer.
Yeah.
If they're getting pushed around, guess what 17's not doing? Making plays.
Very little.
If you're putting D tackles in his lap, D ends in his lap,
You better hope he's not getting pushed. Guys are getting pushed back to him because if you are, you got real issues.
then he can't make the impact that I just referenced.
Real problem.
I would push maybe to say, and I don't think I would put this ahead of the two things that we discussed there, but if you wanted to go to a Champ Anthony, a Caleb Harris, about 19, a guy in the slot that's going to be near Singleton a lot. And maybe they have to have that kind of game, one, against him, two, as an extra defender in the tackle box when Jaden Baugh is getting the football.
Sylvester Smith?
I just referenced 19, not.
That's what I mean.
But hey, you know what? If he's deciding to tackle that game, that could be huge for the Auburn defense. That's a decision that has gone both ways.
If that's the one you decide to tackle?
I would, it'd be helpful, to benefit.
You don't usually make business decisions in business environments. Because
well, business decisions are made against the 230-pound Jaden Baugh.
That will require some business decisions. That'd be a tough one. They hit.
Well, if he's about that life in that game, it would be of benefit. I'll say that.
I'm not saying it won't be. I'm just saying that's going to be a beast. Because that dude will run through a brick wall. Not saying maybe in a contract year, guys are open to it.
I wonder if DJ can get DeMarcus Riddick going back again. Because remember 2 years ago, there were some flashes of him. First off, you're like, how big is this kid?
Yeah, he ran really well a couple years ago.
And you're like, he could just be a hammer. And then it kind of went away. I mean, listen, there's a couple guys that have played off the ball that you didn't expect him to step in front of. But that would be a game where you look at someone of his stature and said he could help.
Yes.
If he could be out there doing the right things. Now back to offense as you were laying out.
Right.
Are
you on the same page with me on the offense?
Yeah, it's just so new.
Too many new.
Oh,
there's no way of knowing for sure what things are going to be. You don't know. Like even the coaches will tell you that they came with them from South Florida in some cases. Even the coaches will tell you, I don't know. We'll see.
I've had a lot of coaches tell me that about a lot of areas of a lot of teams. So don't take that as an alarm for anyone.
No, it's not an alarm. It's just an acknowledgement of where you're at.
Acknowledge Canty for our listeners, please.
Well, Canty can fix it. That's for sure. Cantey, canfixit.com is their website. And we know we have some weather coming through this weekend. It's going to rain Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So with the wet, rainy season here in Alabama, you might be discovering some leaks in your basement, in your foundation, potentially in your crawl space. Is the basement damp? Is it musty? Because water intrusion can lead to some significant damage. foundation damage, mold, allergies. It can ruin your belongings, obviously, but it's harmful to your health. Well, Canty Foundation Specialists can help you. They're the experts in basement waterproofing. They'll come out and do a free inspection for water damage or any other foundation issues you think you might have. So make sure you get that free inspection. You're also going to get a free estimate, and the work will be backed by a lifetime transferable warranty. So call them today at 205-509-3991, or you can visit Canfixit. That's CANTEY, canfixit.com.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about some of these swing games, some of these swing players for Auburn and Alabama next on Jocks. All right, welcome back in. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Appreciate you guys tuning in. 800-239-9569, 800-239-WJOX if you'd like to be a part of the show. Lee in Cincinnati wants to chime in on Auburn, Florida, the game that we believe could go a long way in deciding the season for the Tigers. Lee, what's on your mind?
Well, yes, it'll go a long way deciding the season for the Tigers, but I think it'll decide just as much the season for the Florida Gators because, I mean, Gators have a new coach also, but one thing that the Gators have that I think is going to be he's going to be the biggest difference maker in the game is Jaden Ball, because in my opinion he's a guy that he's very similar to. I think is Fred Taylor from 30 years ago.
Okay, hold on.
A lot bigger.
Well, hold on. I'll give him the power advantage, but he ain't running away from people like Fred did. So,
whoa.
No. Well,
Fred Taylor was special. I think Jaden can be special, but in a little bit of a different way. He's got wiggle now. I mean, listen, I've been talking about this kid since I saw him in spring 2 years ago, but not Fred Taylor speed. No.
Well, I think, though, as Jaden Ball goes, I think that's how the game's going to go. But the Gators, they have to, first of all, establish the run game. That's something the two of you harp on, and y'all have taught me. You have to establish a run game, which will open up the pass game. And I think Jaden Ball is going to be able to do that. At least I hope he is. But I think that he's got the ability, and that Florida's got the team that can do that. Now, bearing that in mind, this game, like I said, is a swing game for both teams this early in the season, and you usually don't have that. I just wish Florida plays FAU to start off with, then Campbell, that powerhouse. Yeah, I don't think they're going to learn a lot about their team with
you
those
don't
two
just
games.
step in against the Camels, okay, and feel like all of a sudden you're not going to be challenged.
About to say, you're going to find out all you need to know that day.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the two. Okay.
And call me crazy. Like, I am very bullish on Florida. I don't know why it's starting to happen again.
I feel like I'm partly responsible for this.
I think it's part of it. I think you probably are. I have to talk to you 15 hours a week, and I think I'm starting to flip a little bit on where Florida could go. Sooner than later, Summerall's a machine. They're not going to do the dumb things they did last year at times. Like, if you look at Florida, they were their own worst enemy at times. And part of that was quarterback decision-making, right?
You know what they're not going to do, Greg?
Beat themselves?
Inside the red zone on 3rd and 2, run a reverse.
What? That's the best play. I do it all the time on NCAA, both times I've played.
Just probably steer clear of that. There would not be an unbroken headset on the Florida sideline if that was pulled while he's the head coach.
I think it makes a ton of sense.
He would literally walk down the sideline and snap every headphone that there was, every headset.
I think it makes a ton of sense.
Especially the deep reverse, the one where you retreat for about 20 yards. That's really the ones you want on 3rd and short.
No. Come on.
Then you counter back with that with the longer reverse play action, slow developing down the field pass play on 3rd and 2.
Yeah.
But you're right. They're not going to make the mistakes.
I don't think it's going to happen. Personally.
And I'll tell you this. I love where Lee's going with this because we had not really had that discussion about Florida. I mean, he stole a little bit of our content for tomorrow's show. That's okay.
Dang it, Lee.
We got some other teams we can talk about. But this thing does line up just like that for Florida also.
Yeah.
FAU Campbell at Auburn. Now, we could talk about the Ole Miss game, and that's fair, but the Ole Miss game, I think, only becomes large if you get past Auburn, or becomes much larger. You lose to Auburn, then all of a sudden, maybe the Ole Miss game becomes a little bit more must-win because you go to Missouri the next week. But this Auburn-Florida game is beginning to feel like 2012 to 15-ish Auburn-Mississippi State.
Yeah.
Remember those games?
Mm-hmm.
It was like early in the season. No one really knew what they were. You had like the Nick Marshall 3rd down pass play in 2013.
Yes.
2010, Cam, that offense couldn't do anything. They make like one play late, find a way to get a win. This is starting to feel like that game of who's going to figure themselves out in an early conference game, and that may push them to gain some momentum to be able to scoop up some wins through the rest of the schedule. It really is beginning to have that feel because I had not looked at it from the Florida perspective yet.
Fair. I think Florida is one of those teams, though, where they are going to have dudes. Like, they are going to have dudes. They're going to have players. Will it materialize in a ton of wins? I don't know, but they really underachieved the last couple of years, and they were their own worst enemy. But they got a little – I didn't love their play calling sequencing from time to time. You referenced them getting cute from time to time. That was accurate. I didn't love some of the things that they did from a protection standpoint. I didn't think the O-line played very well last year. I thought the receivers were great. I thought the quarterback had talent but made too many mistakes. And defensively, I don't know what to make of them, to be honest with you. I really don't. But I do love Brad White, and I think he's just a great football coach. So if they have a good football coach at defensive coordinator, which they've had. It's not like Rob Roberts is a bad football coach by any stretch. He's great. It's just I think Brad White really knows the league. and has done a really good job for a long time of just letting the game come to him and making you be precise offensively. If you're precise offensively, you can beat their scheme, but it's not the easiest thing in the world.
Right. I just think in general he's put a really good staff together. And
Excellent.
Brad White is a major part of that. You and I have had a ton of respect for him for a while now, through his tenure as the Kentucky defensive coordinator. And I thought that was a huge get for John Summerall, not one that a lot of people really talked about.
Nope.
As a big get or a good get. But you would follow that up with Ole Miss at home. Then you're at Mizzou, South Carolina. Then you're at Texas before you take a week off and play Georgia in the Invesco QQQ Atlanta Gridiron Classic. It's exactly what we've known that game for years.
Yep. Always been just a staple every year of the
Trip Q Classic.
Yes. TQ.
Here's the thing, though. You lose the Auburn game. What games then in the next stretch become losable? Ole Miss for sure, Missouri for sure, South Carolina probably, Texas for sure, Georgia for sure, probably Oklahoma, maybe Kentucky, and then you get Vandy and Florida State. You win that game, you get the confidence, you look good in it. All of a sudden, all right, you probably go toe-to-toe with Ole Miss.
Probably.
Maybe you should win at Missouri. You should probably beat South Carolina at home. You can play with Texas. You beat them up last year. Why can't you beat them up again this year? So I think Lee is right on point here. This is the same thing for Florida. This may be more so for Florida than what it is for Auburn, because this could be that game that really swings things in a direction that they could put a really solid football season together.
Yeah. And that's absolutely possible. Now, if you want me to play devil's advocate for a moment, I can and gladly will. I do think with Florida, you do run the risk a little bit of, like we've seen for a while, like Florida, sometimes it can get a little poisonous. You could win and people are still mad. I always have a hard time with that. So if that's the case, then that'll be worth watching and worth kind of keeping a close eye on.
Totally fair.
Because if things are good and they're playing well and yet no one's satisfied, like that weighs heavy. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know why that is. It just weighs heavy.
And that seems like the fan base more than any other that cannot accept winning without looking really good doing it.
Correct.
All interesting watches. An interesting conversation with the coach, William Sanderson, coming up next on Jocks.